You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Wednesday, 3rd of September 2014. Aldershot MP stands behind controversial immigration comments. David Cameron vows ISIS will be squeezed out of existence. 48 Syrian asylum seekers intercepted at Austrian border. Jihadist suspect arrested in Lower Austria. 3 ISIS supporters detained in Copenhagen. Ukrainian president says ceasefire deal reached with Russia. US and Europe are struggling with responses to a bold Russia. EU assesses sports sanctions against Russia. Officials warn that 11 missing planes seized by Islamist rebels in Libya could be used to carry out terrorist attacks on 9/11 anniversary. Thought for the day, now you sees me, now you don't. And finally, a happy Wednesday to you. UK News. Aldershot MP stands behind controversial immigration comments. Sir Gerald Howarth was reported to have said in an email that he believed Enoch Powell, the late author of the notoriously anti-immigration speech from 1968, was correct in his views. Many of his constituents have benefited from immigration, with ex-Gurkhas and their families being allowed to settle in the UK in 2009 following a campaign led by Joanna Lumley. Despite this, the MP this week told the Aldershot News and Mail that he would continue to voice his thoughts on the issue and that it was pretty disgraceful to suggest that he should stop for fear of causing offence. Despite his office having received some pretty unpleasant calls from people without British accents in the aftermath of his comments, he said, "Someone has got to stand up and say something. I worked really hard to protect the constituency from Joanna Lumley's ill-conceived campaign. There are a large number of my constituents that are offended that their country has been changed in a way that they have not been consulted on." Sir Gerald's constituency of Aldershot has one of the highest rates of immigrants in the UK. The 2011 census showed that 7.8% of the population in Aldershot were Nepalese and 5.4% in Farnborough. The proportion of children born to foreign mothers in Rushmore also rose from 27.5% to 29.1% from 2012 to 2013, which is higher than in neighbouring local authorities Surrey Heath 21.5%, Hart 6.7%, Guildford 26.6% and Waverley 17.7%. Asked if he felt that representing constituents who may feel that they are the subject of his condemnation meant he should tone down his comments, Sir Gerald said, "Most of them don't speak English, so they wouldn't understand them anyway." I like this man. I have excellent relations with the ex-Gurkha organisations. The young ex-Gurkhas are not the problem. The problem is the elderly who do not speak English and do not understand our customs. It's not fair on them. It's not in their interest that immigration should continue to be such a cause for concern. I stand firmly and squarely behind what I said. There is massive concern in the country about immigration. We've a crowded island, look at the traffic jams everywhere and the demand for property. These are serious issues that deserve serious discussion. World at 8. We agree with this MP, he is absolutely right, and there are none so blind as will not see. Live in Aldershot for a week and tell me Lumley was right. Wall to wall, dirty old Nepalese people who won't integrate. David Cameron vows ISIS will be squeezed out of existence. David Cameron vowed that the Islamic State ISIS will be squeezed out of existence and promised to build a coalition in the region against it that cannot be mistaken for a Western-led intervention. His remarks appeared to be preparing the ground for a broad coalition that includes Britain to drive out ISIS following a formal invitation from the Iraqi government in Baghdad. Whitehill sources suggested that planned air attacks on ISIS forces based in Syria will be deferred, partly because it would involve incursions into Syrian airspace without any invitation from its government. That would change the legal status of any attacks and possibly weaken the potential regional coalition. Cameron sidestepped the issue of attacks on Syria when pressed by former Labour cabinet member Peter Hain. Details of the scale of the coalition response are likely to be hammered out at NATO's meeting in Newport, Wales over the next 3 days, including a meeting of the 5 leading NATO powers on Friday morning. Vowing the country will never give in to terrorism, the Prime Minister also braced the population for further potential bad news about the British hostage. World at 8. Sorry though I am about the last beheading, it appears the message about Islam, jihad and journalists or helpers has not been listened to. It is open season on these unbelievers who go into these countries. They get what the Christian population there do not deserve. Get over it. The time we get tough with Islam and terrorists will be the time I start to respect this or any UK government. European news. 48 Syrian asylum seekers intercepted at Austrian border. A group of 48 Syrian asylum seekers were intercepted on a train from Italy into Tyrol on Tuesday, according to police. The group, which included 10 children, were taken to a Red Cross care centre in Plon, police said on Wednesday morning. They are expected to be deported to Italy on the same day. Under EU rules, the so-called Dublin III regulation, refugees must seek asylum within the EU country which they first entered. On Monday, the Interior Ministers of Germany and France asked Italy to respect the Dublin III regulation, stressing that many migrants are landing in Italy but headed to northern European countries. According to Austrian police, Syrians and other refugees are returned via the Brenner Pass to Italy on a weekly basis. In July, 21 people were stopped while trying to cross into Austria, while in mid-June, French authorities escorted 5 people off a bus in the Chamonix end of Mont Blanc tunnel and sent them back to Italy. World at 8. Sick of the EU rulings, sick of refugees and sick of Europe. If all the people that applied for asylum were kept in the countries they applied for asylum over, we wouldn't have half of our immigrants and asylums in this country. Most of them come through Europe. Stop them coming and send them back whence they came. Jihadist suspect arrested in Lower Austria. A Chechen asylum seeker has been arrested in Heidrichstein, Lower Austria, for allegedly fighting alongside Islamist militants in Syria's civil war. The 29-year-old suspected jihadist was preparing to leave Austria, police said. He is now in prison in Krems. Previously, Lower Austria's State Office for Protection of the Constitution and the Federal Agency for State Protection and Counter-Terrorism investigated the man on suspicion of participation in a terrorist organisation. He allegedly fought in Syria in 2013. In December of that year, he travelled to Austria for medical treatment and applied for asylum. His request was denied and he then appealed. As many as 130 people from Austria are believed to be fighting as jihadists abroad. More than half of Austrians jihadists originally come from the Caucasus region and have a valid residence permit in Austria. World at 8. Shoot them for sedition or treason or just plain disloyalty. What other landmass in the world would allow this criminal to have health treatment within their country? Can you see the Chinese or Japanese allowing this? Three ISIS supporters detained in Copenhagen. Police raided multiple addresses associated with an organisation that is suspected of selling stickers in support of ISIS and using the proceeds to fund the jihadists. Copenhagen police detained 3 people on Wednesday for the sale of stickers bearing the logo of the Islamic State, the terrorist organisation previously known as ISIS. Police raided 4 addresses in Copenhagen based on the suspicion that the sale of ISIS stickers is being used to directly support the militants. The ISIS stickers were first exposed over the summer by the website syrianblog.dk, a site dedicated to outing suspected Danish jihadists. The stickers were being sold by the association Die Humanitaire Hujja, Humanitarian Hearts, and the association's chairman was amongst those arrested. According to Danmarks Radio, the other 2 arrestees are also associated with the association. The stickers mimic the design of the popular Danish Support Our Troops stickers, but the ribbons are black rather than yellow and bear the ISIS logo along with the text Support Our Ummah, Arabic for nation or community. World at 8. I think you know what I would do with these people and their stickers, and it would not be pleasant for them. World news. Ukrainian president says ceasefire deal reached with Russia. The office of Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko says he and the Russian President Vladimir Putin are in agreement on a ceasefire in eastern Ukraine, but the statement was ambiguous and there was no immediate indication that the fighting would stop. The brief statement Wednesday said mutual understanding was reached regarding the steps that will contribute to the establishment of peace, but gave no details. Poroshenko's office first said that there was an agreement on a permanent ceasefire, but later revised the statement to say agreement on a ceasefire regime. The changes appeared in Ukrainian, Russian and English language versions issued by the office. That appeared to indicate an agreement on conditions necessary for a ceasefire, not that one would imminently be implemented. US and Europe are struggling with response to a bold Russia. American and European officials are struggling to devise a response as Russia bears down on Ukraine, searching for new measures that will have more impact than the economic sanctions imposed so far, without risking major damage to their own industries or military escalation that could spiral out of control. The officials are meeting this week to assemble a new package of sanctions targeting Russia's banking, energy and defence sectors, but expressed scepticism that the measures would force Moscow to reverse course. President Obama faced rising calls from advisers and from Congress to move beyond economic actions to provide arms and more intelligence to Ukraine's beleaguered military. The frustration at the inability to deter Moscow follows a shift on the battlefield, where Russian troops have turned the tide in favour of Ukrainian separatists. President Vladimir Putin of Russia, who last week suggested statehood for parts of eastern Ukraine, ratcheted up his statement again by telling the President of the European Commission that Russia could take Kiev in 2 weeks if it wanted to. EU assesses sports sanctions against Russia. European Union nations are looking at sporting sanctions to punish Russia for its involvement in the Ukraine crisis, but diplomats say the immediate targeting of high-profile events like the 2018 World Cup is unlikely at this stage. An EU official with knowledge of the proposal said Wednesday's sports sanctions are under consideration as the EU seeks to get new measures ready by the weekend. Diplomats from 3 member states said it was unrealistic to think that 28-nation group would try to impose such measures now, and said ambassadors would more likely seek a deepening of current sanctions. The individuals spoke on condition of anonymity because the talks were still ongoing. The EU has so far imposed sanctions against dozens of Russian officials and Russia's financial and arms industry. World at 8 has just about the same effect as sending a Paralympic into the proper Olympics, doesn't it? Officials warn that 11 missing planes seized by Islamist rebels in Libya could be used to carry out terrorist attacks on 9/11 anniversary. US officials fear Islamic militants have stolen nearly a dozen commercial planes in Libya, which could be used to carry out 9/11 style terrorist attacks in the region. 11 commercial jets owned by 2 state-owned airlines went missing last month after militant group Libyan Dawn overtook the international airport in the capital city of Tripoli. In the past 2 weeks, the US government has been issuing warnings about the deteriorating state in Libya, drawing attention to the fact that the planes could be used in attacks to mark the anniversary of the 9/11 later this month. Sources who read the briefs told the Washington Free Beacon. There are a number of commercial airliners in Libya that are missing, one official told the paper. We found out on September 11th what can happen with hijacked planes. On Sunday, the Libyan government announced that they had lost control of the capital to competing militias, including the radical Islamic groups Ansar al-Sharia and Libyan Dawn. Ansar al-Sharia has ties to the Islamic State, also known as ISIS, the Syrian group which today released the filmed beheading of American journalist Steven Sotloff, the second recorded execution of a US hostage by that group. World at 8. Well, take away dictators and put in democratic morons who are sectarian Muslims to boot, and what do you expect? Anarchy is what you get. Try to think ahead sometimes, not just as far as the next armed deal or training ground. Thought for the day. Now you seize me, now's you don't. You may think this is a strange title for a thought, but in reality it isn't. This saying is the butt end of a very racist joke from the 70s. A black man walking across a zebra crossing muttering, "Now's you seize me, now you don't." Personally, I loved it, and it is that saying that encompasses everything that we see nows, or rather don't. Once again our media is going bananas over some town up north which has discovered rather late that many of their vulnerable girls have been raped by Pakistani men. But have no fear, after all the hogwash surrounding this latter-day miracle of discovery, these self-same vulnerable girls are crawling out of the woodwork once again for money. You may wonder where the Yazidis have gone, or if in fact they're still up the sodding mountain being killed or circumcised or beheaded. I certainly have during these last days, when even the national news has been northern based around 30 years too late. Now poor old Putin, who's suffering from over-publicity again along with the Ukrainians, well, leave them all to it. We have enough problems in the UK and Europe without prodding the Russian bear, and I for one have no intention of dying cold whilst the Ukrainians are not. Europe and the UK have for years interfered in foreign countries many times because they have been colonised to some extent by us, which must account for why nowadays they all seem to be hell-bent on trying to get home to mother. Now, for the most part it must be acknowledged now that Britain is too full of non-English bods, with still more in the pipeline. How do you avoid foreigners bringing more trouble to our shores when that is the reason ostensibly that they are fleeing from their own countries? Let us never forget they all came from somewhere, not necessarily Sangatte or the equivalent. Apparently it took, according to Boris Johnson, 100 years for the channel to be built, and don't we all wish it hadn't? In allowing and funding that monstrosity to be dug, we have dug the grave for England along with it. In a programme earlier this week about the food we eat, once again the main root of the problem of too many people in the UK was skirted over because they did the world, and of course the world is overpopulated as well. But the one point always missed is that the third world is the breeding world. The civilised world now cannot afford masses of children because we're busy paying for masses of third world kids over here and in foreign aid. So the result of this is liquid food or insects for the payers of the breeders, so they can have proper food. And if you think this is rubbish, think ahead 30 years in your area. Looking at the cold hard facts and without any racist or religious connotations, think of who will be at the top of the food chain then, or in fact even now. You don't see African or Asian immigrants at our food banks. You see our people in varying stages of poverty. I don't want to live to see the time in which we Brits are outside the supermarkets begging, while these foreign bastards are inside shopping till they drop. And I'm not inciting racial hatred. I am, however, inciting a thought process which in a good world I would not even have to think of, let alone say. We have Cameron, who is trying to get the Jihadists to stay in this country and yet cannot stop them coming back. What sort of people do I live with? Are they all blinkered and liberal? Where does pity and liberalism stop and self-help start? What do we have to happen in the UK to make all the people realise that what has been going on for decades has not only fuelled our crime rates but taken all our benefits which we took for granted? It comes to something when a small island in the North Sea has to build glass mountains to hold crops while all the land has been built over with cheap housing to house foreigners. It isn't even sensible, let alone right. Do you think we nationalists will be bouncing around with leaflets for years about immigration, homosexual paedophiles, a collapsing international health service, Islamic encroachment in our education systems, corruption and sexual corruption in high places, excuse the pun, foreign aid which amounts to foreign corruption, the English culture and history being rewritten if written at all, and the most popular name being Muhammad, if various and mixed governments had not allowed massive immigration from all and sundry all the time since the end of the last war? Do you? Really? Do you? If the Conservative Party had done its job and stuck to its guns after that war, there would be no need for nationalism as a creed. In fact, we now live in a selfish, stupid society, where the poor still want to remain poor so they don't have to work. The vast majority of the population actually still believe that the state should look after them from cradle to grave and from one disaster to another, and that awful things shouldn't happen at all because they don't deserve it. This thinking, compiled with the bilious and awful Marxist and diversity-ridden ethos in the land of reality TV, where many people can laugh unseen at millions of other people doing or saying various degrees of awfulness, is what this green and once pleasant land has become. The answer lies in the thousands of elderly Brits who have made their money in the heydays of the UK, that is the 70s and 80s, and then went or brought properties abroad to escape to, while still clinging to their nationalism by the tenuous roots of a G&T, an entire generation of white flight. Subsequent generations of whites don't have the money to escape, not for them the help given in the form of traffickers and slavers, or the readily available financial help on landing wherever they think they should go. Oh no. They are white and expendable and unimportant to the powers that be, who are either lizard people or varying shades of whatever, but in truth the one thing uniting this very powerful and secretive body is blood and money, in that order. No country ever goes down the pan without considerable help from its inmates, and depending on whom those inmates are and how powerful they have been allowed to be, therein lies the answer. Look inwards, look next door and look around your local shops and tell me there are no changes for the worst over the years and you are either challenged or living in La La Land. But don't worry, as you won't feel a thing as the sword of Islam descends. I love England, never been to Scotland so don't care, Wales seems okay, but it's England I love, and by that I mean the countryside and the offbeat track places. Places of beauty which we might lose in the rush to help and house foreigners who for the most part have come from ruins of mud huts and campons or the slums of India and Pakistan, or shuffled around the dusty streets of Libya. Why build them houses? Why care? Their own governments don't care, why should we? It seems awful to say so, and if I have Jewish or whatever blood in me I still don't care, but looking at Britain today it might have been better had Germany won the war. In fact both bloody wars in which we lost so many good men sacrificed on the altar of democracy, when in fact we don't live in a democracy at all. We do however live in a better state than the bastards who keep coming here, but had Germany and the Third Reich won the war we would not have that particular problem, would we? It may not be known, and although not a Hitler admirer, believe it or not, he did give the rich Jews a chance to flee well before the push on those people, and the one thing preventing many leaving us could, they had nowhere to go. Those Jews had lived in Germany for over 600 years, their families had not immigrated, and the rest of Europe, the US and the UK did not want them. We turned them back before the war, only to do a now as you see me now as you don't after the war. Most fled to Switzerland and Portugal, which were neutral, but don't kid yourselves that the rest of the world gave a tuppenny damn about them until Schindler's List came out. And Hitler had got rid of the Marxist Jews in one sweep, and with the world happily ignorant. Idi Amin, now there was a complete maniac, but even he in his madness gave the Asians 48 hours to decamp, otherwise he could not guarantee their safety. Now in fairness, he gave them more of a chance than Muslim jihadis are giving the Nigerians, the Syrians, the Yazidis and the Christians. In fact that most of these awful people came over here and started their colonisation of the UK didn't make any difference to Amin. He'd got rid of the money men from his country, like Mugabe got rid of the white farmers. And the world, the UN and NATO do not blink an eye, do they? The West allowed India to be carved up in a terrible way, with also the help of Islam in 1947, and we're still paying the price. Africans come over here and have been heard saying we took from them so they are taking from us, which is absolute balderdash. The proof of the pudding is in the eating, and now that whites are more or less gone from Africa it is riddled with incompetence and tribalism, and now of course soon to be with us, Ebola. Oh joy! Now I'm not saying the white races have behaved well abroad, but I don't think that the UK and Europe deserve the on-Russia revenge in the form of colonisation ably helped on by the EU and our own. In fact, not only do we not deserve it, but our children do not deserve it, and one day this tide can and must be halted completely, and repatriation actually carried out, or we will be outside Asda with our begging bowls, and not too soon in the distant future the call to prayer will echo throughout our towns and cities, which will no longer be our own. And finally, a happy Wednesday. This example shows the importance of accuracy in your tax return. HMRC, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, has returned the tax return to a man in Stansted after he apparently answered one of the questions incorrectly. In response to the question, "Do you have anyone dependent on you?" he wrote, 2.1 million illegal immigrants, 1.1 million crackheads, 4.4 million unemployable Jeremy Kyle scroungers, 900,000 criminals in over 85 prisons, plus 650 idiots in Parliament and the whole of the European Commission. The HMRC stated that the response he gave was unacceptable. The man's response back to HMRC was, "Who did I miss out?" I just love that. And the following is purported to be an exchange of correspondence between a customer and the Irish Railway Company. "Gentlemen, I have been riding your trains daily for the last 2 years and the service on your line seems to be getting worse every day. I'm tired of standing in the aisle all the time on a 14-mile trip. I think the transportation system is worse than that enjoyed by people 2,000 years ago. Yours truly, Patrick Finnegan. Dear Mr Finnegan, we received your letter with reference to the shortcomings of our service and believe you are somewhat confused in your history. The only mode of transportation 2,000 years ago was by foot. Sincerely, the Irish Railway Company. Gentlemen, I am in receipt of your letter and indeed I think you are the ones who are confused in your history. If you will refer to the Bible and the Book of David, 9th chapter, you will find that Balaam rolled to town on his ass. That, gentlemen, is something I've not been able to do on your train in the last 2 years. Yours feckin' truly, Patrick Finnegan." You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart and I wish you all a very good night.